Coming up, the verdict is in.
Tonight, the good Lord and the people of Missouri have given us the victory.
Obviously, we fell short, and that's disappointing.
Today, I think the people of Kansas really spoke, and they spoke so loudly.
It was a tough race. We battled close to the very end, but this one just wasn't God's will.
You took a leap of faith in me, and I won't let you down.
The time for people to not be heard and not be seen and not be listened to or represented well changes now.
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Bob and Marlise Gorley, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Nick Haynes. What on earth happened? Why? And what now? Plus, a look at some of the big stories we missed while we've been fixated with laser beam intensity on election 2018 in our metro. Helping make sense of it all this week, Mr. Up-to-Date on KCUR-FM, star editorial writer Steve Kraske, KMBC9 chief political reporter Michael Mahoney, fresh from covering election night in the Kansas Capitol, 41 Action News reporter Kat Reed, and political analyst, columnist, and star editorial writer Dave Helling. They're talking about history being made in Kansas this week. Did the state just elect the first mixed martial arts fighter to Congress, one of two Native American women taking seats in the House of Representatives for the first time in history, first openly gay member of the Kansas congressional delegation?
We have the opportunity to reset expectations about what people think when they look at Kansas.
So how did that happen? And ultimately, how did a woman who 99% of the area had never heard of 6 months ago win by what turned out to be quite a wide margin, Steve Kraske?
You know, Nick, it was a remarkable story. No one did know Sharice Davids 6 months ago, but she caught wind. The wind caught her sails, and off she went. And I think Kevin Yoder, his big problem is he just refused to take on President Trump in a district where Trump had grown increasingly unpopular since he lost the election in 2016 inside the 3rd District.
Is that what would have changed this result, or was that outcome never going to change for Kevin Yoder?
The outcome probably never was going to change for Kevin Yoder, because Kevin Yoder was never going to back away for his support for Donald Trump and the Trump administration. And also, there was a tremendous amount of resentment in the 3rd District, and it was a classic suburban, I won't use the term blue wave, but blue riptide that pulled Kevin Yoder out of Congress here. He had problems with women. He had problems because of his Trump alliance, and it was the wrong time for this. And he is unapologetic about saying, "I would have ran the same campaign tomorrow that I ran this year."
Michael Mahoney says he was too aligned with Donald Trump, yet he never appeared with Donald Trump at any point during this campaign, Dave Helling.
Right. Trump did endorse him twice, which I think was probably unhelpful for Kevin Yoder in that district. But there is a change going on in our politics across the country, Nick, and one of those changes is increasingly Democratic districts, which tend to be better educated, younger, more diverse, which describes Johnson County. I mean, Kevin Yoder won by 10 points when Donald Trump was on the ballot, lost by almost 10 points this week. That suggests that there's a real fundamental shift going toward the Democratic Party in suburban districts. At the same time, rural districts, as we'll talk about in Missouri, are much more heavily conservative, heavily Republican. Blue-collar votes are going to the Republican Party. There's really a fundamental shift going on. Kevin Yoder got caught in that. There was nothing he could do to hold the wave back.
And this was a female candidate in the Year of the Woman. While lots have been made of the gains of women in this election, it's certainly noteworthy also how much of a victory this election was for gay Americans, and particularly in Kansas, where not only did Sharice Davids win, but in Johnson County, two Democratic candidates became the first openly gay members of the Kansas House of Representatives. Missouri broke that milestone a while ago, but until now, Kansas was one of just 7 states that had never never elected an openly LGBT state legislator, Kat Reed?
That's right. Well, I think that you've seen, first of all, just the right candidates come along here. And also there has been a push in, you look at Mission, you look at Prairie Village, everyone has just passed these anti-discrimination ordinances. So I think that it's becoming just an issue that people are rallying behind.
Michael.
And if you look at the first news conference that Laura Kelly had on Thursday, some of the news that came out of that was the fact that she is drawing up an executive order that will reinstate protection for LGBT people that are working for the state. So it's, as Kat says, it's out there in the air.
I think there's a hunger out there, Nick, for a more diverse representation. We'll talk later in the show about the Johnson County Commission getting a woman representative for the first time in a while, at least. And that commission had been dominated by white males. That dog is no longer going to hunt.
People want to be represented by people who are like them. They want to see themselves in their elected officials.
What about Kevin Yoder now, Dave Helling? What does he do?
Well, we'll see. I mean, I don't think his political career is necessarily over. I think he may try and get some sort of job in Washington and maintain some sort of profile. And I would not rule him out as an opponent for Sharice Davids or anyone in the 3rd District, or maybe governor. There are lots of opportunities. He got caught in a wave that he didn't really anticipate and didn't know how to fight, and that suggests he'll have another day in the public sphere.
I believe that Kevin Yoder is going to be a dad and a father and a husband for a while. He's got a couple of young daughters, 3 and 5. They're at the age where dad needs to be at home. Being a congressman or woman is an incredibly difficult job, especially the strain on the family. His kids are at an age now where I think he would delight in being a dad that comes home. He'll have a career down the line. He might run for Senate, might run for the governor, as Dave said, but for right now, look for Kevin Yoder to stay pretty close to home.
This wasn't the only big win, of course, for Democrats in Kansas on Election Day. They now have a Democratic governor as State Senator Laura Kelly defeats Chris Kobach.
Today, Kansans voted for change. A change not only in the direction of our state, but a change in the tone in our state. And that change will come to Topeka now.
Kat Reed, you were actually at that campaign there on election night. Were they really expecting not just a win like that, but a win of that size?
I think that some of the people I was speaking to at the party, like State Senator Barbara Bollier, she said she knew that it was going to be a decisive victory. She said she wasn't shocked. She was very pleased but not shocked. The results came in so quickly. Another thing that I want to point out, you heard Senator, soon-to-be Governor Kelly talking about the change in tone. One of the big moments during that speech, she mentioned her opponent, Chris Kobach, and someone booed. And she put her hand up kind of like this to silence them. And she said, "We're going to be civil in Kansas now." And that is a lot of what her speech focused on.
A lot of this race was about Greg Orman, the independent candidate, being the spoiler in this race. He was going to spoil this. He gets about 6% of the vote in this election. Was he a non-factor by the end of this, Michael?
He was a non-factor, and at the end of it, he mulled seriously whether or not he was going to drop out of the race at the end of the month of October. The thing to remember about the Laura Kelly victory is the heart of it was in Johnson County, yes, where she ran up 17 point spread over Chris Kobach. The other thing I'll say very quickly about this is she's going to work on school finance right off the bat. She'll probably get that done. The other big issue that she will have in her first session of the legislature will be trying to expand Medicaid, and given the more conservative nature of the Kansas legislature, that might be the first hurdle.
Because actually, regardless of what happened in Kansas with Democrats at these higher offices, in the House of Representatives, Republicans actually gained a seat, so it's actually going to be harder to accomplish some of these things.
It'll be a hard road. People before have, they thought because Governor Brownback vetoed the Medicaid expansion, well, now we have a Democrat in office. This will be an easy road. It's going to be a difficult challenge.
Just briefly, it would have been a much different state had the results in the legislature been exactly what they were, and Chris Kobach as governor. I mean, the legislature would have sent him conservative legislation after conservative legislation. At least now from Laura Kelly, the threat of a veto will presumably bring people to the table. One other quick note, Nick. She won by 46,000 votes. She won Johnson County by 43,000 votes. Chris Kobach and Laura Kelly were even in the rest of the state except in Johnson County. Johnson County has become the most important location for statewide office, and we'll see how they react.
What does Chris Kobach do now? Is he going to be the next Attorney General of the United States now that Jeff Sessions has resigned from that position?
Well, I think there's a possibility that occurs. We will see what the President of the United States does, Nick. I'm not in the business of predicting what Donald Trump is going to do now or ever, but I think he'll be looked at that. I think there's a possibility of Homeland Security, the head of that agency, leaving right now. Donald Trump has been pretty upfront about this, Nick. He has said if he loses, I'll bring Chris Kobach into my administration within about 2 seconds. So we should know something.
You've been shaking your head, Michael.
Chris Kobach as Attorney General would have the same difficulties that Matt Whitaker is having as the interim Attorney General, in the fact that he would probably have, it would just raise all sorts of flags, and the Democrats would go irate right off the top. Homeland Security, as Steve suggests, perhaps there'll be a place for Kobach in the Trump administration. Whether it's at a cabinet level or something else remains to be seen. It's not going to be HE.
Is it too much, though, to see this as a Kansas Democratic wave when the Kansas 2nd Congressional District, Republican Steve Watkins, beats Democrat Paul Davis to win the seat that covers almost all of eastern Kansas outside of Johnson, Wyandotte, and Miami counties? And outside of governor, every statewide race is won by Republicans, Ken.
Well, I think even Senator Kelly will say she wouldn't call it a blue wave. She said it was a wave of common sense. You look at her campaign, it wasn't run as a blue wave campaign. It was run, look at all the support we have from moderate Republicans. So I think that it's hard to say that it was a blue wave.
You know, ultimately, this was a huge rejection of Chris Kobach, who was so much better known, who had access to money if he had chosen to get it. And he had the popular in Kansas President of the United States stumping for him not once, but a couple times, and the president's son as well. Huge rejection of Chris Kobach and a huge rejection of Sam Brownback, Nick, for the 7 years we saw of his administration.
Now, over in Missouri, it was the race for the United States Senate seat currently held by Democrat Claire McCaskill that was capturing the national headlines. She's now out after spending the past decade in Washington. Now get ready to say Senator Josh Hawley.
I just had a nice phone call from Senator McCaskill. She couldn't have been more gracious. She conceded the race. I want to thank her for her service. And I had a very nice call with the President of the United States. Thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership. Thank you for believing in Missouri. Tonight, the people of Missouri have delivered.
The Republican Missouri Attorney General will now become the youngest senator on Capitol Hill. Like in Kansas, this wasn't even close. He wins by 6 points. How did big Republican names in Kansas lose their jobs on election night when just a few miles down the road, another Republican who hitched his wagon to the Trump presidency wins so convincingly, Dave?
Well, it's proof, Nick, that each race is its own story, and so there may be just some anomalies, Chris Kobach and Josh Hawley, but Missouri has been trending Republican for 20 years, or as I like to say, Republicans have been trending Missouri for 20 years. It's becoming much more rural, maybe a little less educated. The urban turnout was horrible Tuesday night, Kansas City and St. Louis, at least terrible from Claire McCaskill's point of view. Her strategy of going to rural counties did not work. If you look at the map, it's red everywhere except for Kansas City, St. Louis, and Columbia. It may have been that there was nothing she could have done either in this state at this time, but Hawley was a good candidate, ran a smart race. He's the new senator.
Michael.
It's hard to overestimate the impact that President Trump had on the Hawley campaign in the state of Missouri. The other thing is...
But why didn't that work then for Chris Kobach?
Because, as Dave just said, apples and oranges.
Okay.
Two very different states, very different dynamics involved in it. The other thing is referencing that map that Dave was just talking about. If you go on to that, county by county, the way a Democrat, and McCaskill in particular, has won in Missouri in the past has been big wins in Kansas City, big wins in St. Louis, and in Columbia, Boone County, and then not get clobbered outstate. She got clobbered outstate, some cases over 70%, 70-30 defeats in some places in southeast Missouri, in southwest Missouri. She did not hold the margin of defeat down to where she could manage it.
Steve?
You know, I have a column in the paper today, Nick, pointing out that the Missouri Democratic Party now is at its lowest point perhaps ever in Missouri history. Only, 2 congressional representatives are Democratic now. The other 6 are Republicans. Both U.S. senators are Republican. The entire statewide lineup is Republican, save for Nicole Galloway, the state auditor. This is a really ugly time for Democrats.
And Dave mentions the Missouri State Auditor, Nicole Galloway, the only Democrat now in state office, barely holds on. Was that because of Josh Hawley's strong showing?
Yes, and because of just partisan voting, which is increasingly part of what happens in a lot of states. It didn't happen in Kansas at the top of the ticket, but for other statewide it did. Same thing with Nicole Galloway, I think, and Sandra McNaught.
What happens to Claire McCaskill now, Michael?
Claire McCaskill becomes a grandmother.
Okay.
She's already a grandmother.
She doesn't become the head of a university or a foundation.
All right, get off me, lay off my back. A full-time grandmother.
All right.
Even if she had won this race, she was talking at the end of it that it was sort of a bittersweet end of the campaign because she thought this was going to be her final campaign. I do not look for her, even though she wants to be governor of Missouri desperately, to launch a campaign in 2020 to be the Democrat for governor.
Yes, she also actually told my colleague Tom Dempsey that she even debated if she was going to run this time. So I think that we'll see her kind of take some steps out, but she did say, she said, I get in trouble for my mouth a lot, and so I've had to hold back, and that is no more.
So much more to cover. Also on Tuesday, Missouri became the 32nd state to legalize medical marijuana. Amendment 2 passing with 66% of the vote. We're getting calls at KCPT asking, so when can we start legally using pot, Kat?
Well, that is going to be a while.
Okay.
The Department of Health, and so tell your viewers to not start doing that, but the Department of Health and Senior Services has to get all of the regulations in place. They're going to open applications for dispensaries and cultivation facilities. They'll have to do that by June. So that starts the process.
Look for medical marijuana to be available in the state of Missouri very late in 2019 or very early in 2020, and folks can have up to 4 ounces of this medication at their house. It will not happen tomorrow. You can't go down and buy a joint anywhere. Legally.
Well, you can. You just can't do it legally.
Legally.
62% of voters in Missouri said yes on Tuesday to increasing the minimum wage to $12 an hour. Not immediately, but gradually over the next 5 years. If you're wondering, when do you get the extra cash? That will be in January, when the current minimum wage jumps from $7.85 to $8.60. Meanwhile, voters reject another big issue on the ballot, a hike in the gas tax to fund highway improvements. Why so supportive of hiking the minimum wage, but no way on paying a few cents more on a gallon of gas, Steve?
Well, I think the minimum wage, Nick, is seen more as a fairness thing, help folks who are working hard to get ahead a little bit. Maybe folks in rural Missouri, Nick, don't want to pay extra money for all the miles they drive to get to and from somewhere. This is now going to be a huge issue for the state, a huge challenge for the new governor. Where does Missouri go to get money for a road system that everyone agrees is way underfunded?
And which will present the interesting dynamic of roads versus schools in the next legislature. Watch for that. The other thing I want to offer up as a theory that the Prop D folks are talking about is an unintended consequence of this was the Josh Hawley turnout, in the fact that he ginned up very conservative Missouri voters to go out and vote. The same very sort of Missouri conservatives that do not like any tax at any time. And it's like everybody says, everybody feels gas prices are too high, too much taxes and everything like that. These folks went out and without organized opposition, pushed the no button on this, and this thing went down and it wasn't even close.
61% of Missouri voters also vote to curb campaign contributions, gifts to lawmakers, and change the way legislative districts are drawn. It was Amendment number 1, promoted to voters as the Clean Missouri Amendment. How will this change the way elections take place in Missouri? Will it affect the next election in 2020?
So they will have to appoint a new state demographer. It's supposed to be a nonpartisan position. It's going to take a while for this to have an impact because the census is in 2020, and it's within 6 months of the census that the demographer has to draw up proposed maps. Then it goes to a commission, so it's going to be a process.
So no immediate impact then, Dave?
Well, of course, the lobbyist prohibitions and the other things in Clean Missouri will take effect as constitutional amendments. Mike's right that there's a theory that somehow the Josh Hawley turnout hurt on Proposition D, the gas tax, but voters did approve Clean Missouri, which was opposed by some conservatives. They did approve the minimum wage. I think it may have been more of an urban-rural thing on the gas tax. We should point out, though, that redistricting is a huge issue.
Yep.
And in 2020, when the census is taken, and that's why the election of Laura Kelly means a lot in Kansas, because they'll have to draw new maps in Kansas. The Watkins victory shows what impact the map drawing can have on who goes to Congress, and there will be a Democrat in place to oversee that on the other side.
Cleaning up Jackson County government didn't work out as cleanly, so to speak, on Election Day. 7 ethics bills on the ballot there. Voters approved less than half of them. Only questions 3, 4, and 5 getting the nod from voters. Those were the measures term limiting the sheriff and giving him control over the jail, term limiting the prosecutor and giving her control over the combat anti-drug tax, and the measure giving lawmakers power to remove the county attorney. Does the picking and choosing through these questions show how discerning voters are, or that they were fatigued by the end of the ballot and gave up trying, Steve?
I was amazed, Nick, by how discerning voters were this time. They picked through the ballot here. They picked through the ballot on the medical marijuana set of questions. Complicated stuff. Hard for voters to figure out early on which way to go on the marijuana thing. They made some interesting choices here. They turned down term limits for county lawmakers because I think they understood they were going to also receive big pay raises if they passed that.
Panelists, complete the sentence for me. The biggest winner of election 2018 in Kansas and Missouri was blank, Dave Helling.
I think the biggest winner, we'll get to the loser here in a minute. The winner was the Democratic Party in Kansas, which was moribund 6 years ago. We had arguably the most conservative congressional delegation in the country. And today we sit with at least one member of the House from the Democratic Party, and that wave seems to have broken.
Kat Reed.
I would say bipartisanship in Kansas, having the Democrats with the moderate Republicans for Laura Kelly.
Michael Mahoney, your biggest winner was who?
Steve Watkins. He came from nowhere. He came from nowhere, and it'll be an interesting 2 terms for him in the 2nd district. I don't think anybody anticipated, even back in the primary, that he would be a congressman-elect.
Steve Kraske.
Voters in Kansas who have advanced voting privileges, they don't have those in Missouri, and they're needed. Voters in Missouri who had initiative petition process to pass things like minimum wage increases and a big change in cleaning up state government.
I put the libraries, which got more than 90% of the vote. Nobody else got that much of a share of the vote. So libraries in Kansas City where a tax was passed. What about the biggest loser in election 2018 in Kansas and Missouri, Michael?
Missouri Democratic Party, Steve Kraske.
Let's see him right now.
Right now, I say Paul Davis over in Kansas' 2nd district. His political career is over. He led in that race for Congress. I think this is 2 times a loser now, and he's done.
Dave.
I would say the Missouri Democratic Party with Kevin Yoder a close second. He was in what everyone thought was a safe district for years. It isn't safe anymore. It may bounce back and forth for a while. So between the Missouri Democrats and Kevin, those were the people who lost.
Kat Reed.
I think the initial temptation is to say Chris Kobach, but this is just the beginning for him, so you really can't call him a loser of the night. So I'd probably go with the Missouri Democrats.
Can I also say the winner was the Kansas City Star editorial page, which picked most of the winners.
I thought Channel 9 and 41 Action News did a pretty darn
can't.
good job. So did KCPT. They were concerned that this would be Armageddon at the polls with malfunctioning machines, lines as long as those for rides at Disney World, for all the naysaying. Did the process work, Steve?
I think by and large it did, but still Missouri voters have to wait so long to cast a ballot, so unnecessary, and this is voter suppression being played out at the macro
But it wasn't
level.
like what we saw in Johnson County, where it took almost a week. Well, it did take a week to learn who the governor nominee was in the Republican Party.
It's true. The results came in very quickly, and I will say, at least at my polling place, there was not a long line, and it was very easy to vote.
We should be thankful for what we do have in Kansas and Missouri. I must say, they're still counting the ballots in Florida. They're still counting ballots in California. It could take 2 more weeks. Arizona isn't settled. At least we have answers to our questions within the week.
Now, while we were fixated with laser beam intensity on election coverage, KCI Airport was back in the news.
The cost of the new single-terminal KCI Airport is going up.
This is $1 billion+ project, now almost $2 billion. There's going to be surprises.
Could what was first touted as a $1 billion project now come closer to $2 billion? If so, why, Kat Reed?
Yes, so the $1.9 billion number factors in the cost of selling bonds, kind of the additional financing. And so the project cost is 1.6, total 1.9. It's going to be more than that over time because then you have to factor in interest on the mortgage. So it has increased. Part of it was a reflection of the terminal getting bigger, and part of it, they say, depends on interest rates.
We're told, though, that we shouldn't care because taxpayers are not on the hook, right, Michael?
Well, yeah, from the standpoint that the airlines will pay for the new renovation. However, as the price tag on this thing goes up, you can expect that ticket fees and landing fees that are attached to your airline ticket at KCI are going to go up, so the users of it will pay more.
And I have to point out that the airlines are not necessarily on board yet, even though we've heard that, because they haven't yet signed the use and lease terms agreement that is part of this.
Now, this week, Jackson County Executive Frank White overwhelmingly winning re-election. His predecessor, meanwhile, reports to prison after receiving a 27-month sentence for misusing campaign contributions. Mike Sanders was to surrender to authorities Monday to begin that sentence, yet I never saw whether that happened or not. And did he end up being sent to what some view as a cushy white crime facility or somewhere else?
Mike Hendricks, who has reported this story for the Star, tells me that Mike Sanders did surrender at Yankton, which is north of here, of course. No, you know, there's some argument that federal prison time can be cushy. That just isn't the case, even in the most minimum of security facilities, Nick. Having your freedom taken from you for 2 years plus is a tough deal.
Yankton was the site that Mike Sanders, that's where he wanted to go. He wanted to work on welding, and that's what he will do at Yankton, apparently, Nick.
We mentioned that Frank White won, so did the Johnson County chair of the commission, Ed Eilert. He's being re-elected. But as you mentioned at the very beginning of the program, there will be a change to the makeup of the Johnson County Commission, having a woman now for the first time in a while.
Fast won a commission seat, and that's good news. And actually, one other incredible story out of Johnson County, Melissa Rooker is apparently lost in her House re-election date. That's a big deal.
And that is our Week in Review. Our thanks to this week's news reviewers. From KMBC 9 News, Michael Mahoney, and from the pages of your Star, Dave Helling. You'll also find Steve Kraske on the end of your driveway, too, in a little see-through plastic bag. You can see him weekdays also at 11 on KCUR-FM. And from 41 Action News, reporter Kat Reed, I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us at KCPT, thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.